Today we're making a modified round yoke sweater. As usual, the pattern is available on my website, linked below, and I'll be using my own measurements in this video. Make sure to start with a gauge swatch. All of the sleeves are worked the same way. Cast on 62 stitches in waste yarn for 1x1 ribbing. I like to finish my waste yarn with a few rows of circular knitting. It makes it easier to remove later. To create a neat finished edge, set your tension to 0 on both carriages, cancel the circular knitting, and feed in your main yarn. I'm using 2 strands of a lace weight acrylic. Knit 1 row, bump the tension up to 1, and set up for circular knitting. Knit 2 rows, and then cancel the circular knitting and set your ribbing tension. Knit 21 rows of ribbing. Transfer all of the stitches to the main bed for stockinette. Drop the ribber down. Swap out the sinker plate. Make sure to adjust your tension. And then knit to row count 178, increasing 1 stitch each side every 6 rows. I have a separate video on how to do this. When you reach the end, you should have 110 stitches. Place yarn markers at needle 36 on the left and on the right to make sleeve assembly easier later. Make a slip knot with waste yarn. Then take the whole thing off on waste yarn. You'll need these live stitches later. Here's your sleeve. There's the ribbing and the top of the sleeve. The rest of the sleeves are worked the same way. When you have all of your sleeves, it's time to start on the yoke. We're only working with the stitches between the yarn markers. Rehang the live stitches back on the main bed. This goes a lot faster if you can pick up multiple stitches. When you get to the end, join the next sleeve by overlapping the marked stitches. You're trying to fit as many sleeves as possible back on the machine. Here are my sleeves with the overlap. You might have to get creative with the weights. Pull 1 extra needle out on each side to make seaming easier later. The first band of the yoke is 52 rows of Fair Isle. I'm using the lace carriage trick here to avoid a plain first row. The first row of my Fair Isle pattern is blank, so the first pass of the lace carriage does nothing. Then the second pass selects the needles but does no knitting. This way, when I switch to the main carriage, I can set up for color knitting, thread my yarns, and then knit Fair Isle on the first pass. When you get to the end of the pattern, knit one last row, and then take the whole thing off on waste yarn. Tug on the stitches to set them. Repeat until all of your sleeves have the first band of the yoke. To accomplish the round yoke shaping, we reduce the number of stitches each band by 1/3. Hang at least 2 stitches with no overlap to make seaming easier, then start overlapping every other stitch. The easiest way to do this is to pick up 3 stitches at once and overlap with the previous stitch. Pick up 3 stitches, overlap. When you get to the end, overlap 1 stitch with the next piece. Again, we're trying to hang as many sections on the machine as possible. Here's what it looks like with half of my sleeves. Knit 14 rows of Fair Isle pattern. We're going to do this a total of 3 times, reducing the number of stitches by 1/3 each time. Always scrapping off on waste yarn. Rehang the live stitches, reducing by 1/3. Knit 14 rows of Fair Isle. Scrap off. Rehang the live stitches, reducing by 1/3. Always hang as many pieces on the machine as possible. Knit 14 rows of Fair Isle. Scrap off. Now try it on and see how it hangs. The neckline isn't quite what I want it to be, so I'm going to reduce one more time before I do the ribbing. Bring the bottom bed up. Transfer every other stitch to the ribber for 1x1 ribbing. Knit 10 rows. Pull out enough yarn for a sewn bind off, about 3 times the length of the work. Switch to circular knitting and knit a few rows of waste yarn. A sewn bind off for 1x1 ribbing is a lot like the Kitchener stitch you use to close the toe of a sock. Go in through an old stitch, and then out through a new one. In through an old stitch and out through a new one. Now it's time to knit the body panel. Rehang the remaining live stitches from the sleeves on the machine, starting from the yarn marker. When you get to the end, make sure to join the next half of the sleeve overlapping one stitch. Make sure to overlap when two sleeves meet as well. This is what it looks like when all the live stitches are rehung. Knit 74 rows. Then bring up the bottom bed and transfer every other stitch to the ribber for 1x1 ribbing. Knit 21 rows of ribbing. Pull out a long tail and waste off on circular knitting. Do this for both halves of the body and bind off the same way as with the neckline. It's done! Well, all of the knitting is done. I just need to add some seams now. I am leaving all of the waste yarn on until the end for a more dramatic reveal. But got all my sleeves, and I've got the body panels knit. They just need to be attached. Okay, it's done for real this time. I seamed all the sleeves and the yoke sections together. Let's see what it looks like. I gotta get my arms in the right sleeve. Ugh. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, there's a whole sleeve cut in there. There we go. Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Oh, that's exactly what I was going for. Oh, and the round yoke is just lovely. And you can see all the sleeves. I love it. I love it. It's perfect. It makes me happy. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. I had a lot of fun making it. Let me know what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe. All that jazz. Happy knitting.